The tennis world is experiencing an absolute meltdown right now, and if you haven't been paying attention to what's happening at the Qatar Open, you need to stop everything and listen to this because what we're witnessing is unprecedented. Aryna Sabalenka, the world #1 and the woman who just battled through one of the most emotionally devastating Grand Slam finals in recent memory, has officially pulled out of the Qatar Open. But here's the part that should terrify tournament organizers everywhere. She's not alone. Not even close. This isn't just one superstar making a strategic scheduling decision. This is a full-scale exodus, a mass abandonment, a tournament implosion of absolutely epic proportions. The Qatar Open is literally disintegrating before our eyes, and what we're watching right now could fundamentally change how the WTA operates for years to come. Buckle up, because when you see the complete list of names fleeing Doha like it's a sinking ship, your jaw is going to hit the floor. Let me paint you the full picture of this absolute chaos because the situation is so much worse than just Sabalenka withdrawing. Yes, she makes the headlines because she's the biggest name, the defending world #1 who actually won this very tournament back in 2020 when she was still establishing herself as a future champion. But she's just the tip of an absolutely massive iceberg that's about to sink this entire event. Jessica Pegula, currently ranked world #6 and one of the most consistent performers on the entire tour, decided she'd rather be literally anywhere else than Doha right now. Naomi Osaka, the 4-time Grand Slam champion who's been working her way back to peak form after taking time away from the sport, took one look at the Middle East swing and said no thank you to the entire thing. Madison Keys withdrew. Barbara Krejcikova is out. The injury list keeps expanding with players like Marketa Vondrousova stepping away to recover from various ailments. Even Leylah Fernandez, who tennis fans were genuinely excited to watch this season, hasn't even started her 2025 campaign yet. Are you starting to see the problem here? This isn't a normal situation where one or two players have legitimate injuries and have to make difficult choices about their schedules. This is systematic. This is strategic. This is half the women's tour looking at the Qatar Open and collectively deciding it's not worth their time, their energy, or their bodies. The tournament organizers in Doha must be absolutely losing their minds right now. Think about the position they're in. They promoted this event with the promise of world-class tennis featuring the biggest names in the women's game. They sold tickets months in advance to fans who wanted to see Sabalenka, Pegula, Osaka, and all these incredible athletes compete at the highest level. They secured sponsorships and television deals based on the star power that was supposed to light up their courts and create must-watch tennis. And now, what do they actually have? A tournament so depleted, so gutted of talent, that they're scrambling to fill the main draw with players who were originally supposed to be grinding through qualifying rounds just to get in. Let that sink in for a moment. The Qatar Open, a premier-level WTA event that's supposed to showcase elite tennis and attract global attention, is now giving main draw spots to players like Alexandra Eala, Emiliana Arango, Daria Kasatkina, Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova, and Kristina Buxa. Not because these players earned their way through qualifying in dominant fashion, but because there's literally nobody else available to fill the spots. The seats that were reserved for the top players in the world are now occupied by athletes who, while talented and deserving of respect, were never meant to be the headliners of this particular event. Now, that's not a knock on these players at all. They're professional tennis players competing at an incredibly high level, and they've worked their entire lives to reach this stage. But this isn't how a marquee WTA tournament is supposed to function. You don't build a premier event by desperately plugging holes in your lineup because everyone you actually wanted decided to skip town. This is like planning a blockbuster movie premiere and having all your A-list stars cancel at the last minute, forcing you to fill the red carpet with extras from the background. It might technically still be a premiere, but it's not what anyone paid to see. The domino effect here is absolutely fascinating to watch, and it all starts with understanding what Aryna Sabalenka just went through in Melbourne. The Australian Open final against Elena Rybakina wasn't just another match on her schedule. It was a brutal, emotionally devastating battle that left Sabalenka absolutely shattered in ways that go far beyond the physical exhaustion of playing elite tennis for 2 straight weeks. And here's what makes the situation so interesting and so revealing. Sabalenka didn't try to hide her emotional state afterward. In her post-match press conference, she was shockingly honest about how she was feeling, and her transparency gives us a rare window into the mental and physical toll that elite tennis actually takes on these athletes. When asked about her performance in the final, Sabalenka didn't give the standard corporate athlete response that we're all so used to hearing. She didn't say she gave it her all and she's proud of her effort and she'll learn from this experience and come back stronger next time. Instead, she said something far more human and far more revealing about what it's actually like to lose a Grand Slam final. She admitted that Rybakina played an incredible match and that she tried her absolute best, but it simply wasn't enough. She acknowledged that she had opportunities during the match and feels like she missed a couple of crucial moments. But then she shrugged with this defeated energy and said that's just tennis. One day you're the loser, the next day you're the winner. And then came the line that should tell you everything you need to know about her current mindset and mental state. Hopefully I'll be more of a winner this season than a loser. Hoping right now and praying. Let's pause right there because that statement is absolutely loaded with meaning. This is the world number one we're talking about. A woman who has won multiple Grand Slam titles and dominated the tour for years. A player who should theoretically be at the peak of her confidence and self-belief. And she's literally saying out loud that she hopes and prays she wins more than she loses this year. That's not the confident champion talk you typically hear from elite athletes who are supposed to project invincibility and certainty. That's someone who just had her heart ripped out in a Grand Slam final and is trying desperately to piece herself back together while cameras are pointed at her face and journalists are asking her to explain her feelings. That's vulnerability. That's brutal honesty. That's what actually happens when you pour every ounce of physical and emotional energy you have into a tournament for 2 straight weeks, fight your way through incredibly difficult matches, make it all the way to the final, and come up just short of the ultimate prize. The emotional devastation doesn't just disappear because the match is over. It lingers. It festers. It replays in your mind over and over again during sleepless nights where you can't stop thinking about what you could have done differently. The journalist pushed further during the press conference, asking Sabalenka when she planned to review her Australian Open performance with her coaching team. Her response was even more illuminating and showed just how raw her emotions still were. She said she wasn't sure when she'd be ready to watch the matches back and actually joked with her agent about it, saying maybe in a week or maybe in a few days, whenever she feels like she can actually move on from this loss and look at it objectively without breaking down. Then she described her current emotional state as a combination of laughing and crying, calling it a hysterical moment that wasn't really productive or helpful but was just her way of releasing everything. She was just letting it all out, releasing all the frustration and disappointment and anger that had been building up inside her. She admitted she was upset with herself because once again, she felt like she had opportunities in that match but couldn't maintain her level when Rybakina cranked up the aggression and started dictating play. But then, in a moment of genuine self-awareness that you don't often see from athletes in the immediate aftermath of a crushing defeat, she caught herself spiraling and acknowledged that overall she actually played great tennis in Australia, even in the final, and that she did her absolute best. Rybakina was simply the better player that day. Simple as that. Sometimes you can do everything right and still lose because your opponent was just slightly better when it mattered most. But here's the part that really shows you what elite athletes go through behind the scenes, the part that the cameras don't capture and the highlight reels don't show and the casual fans never think about. Sabalenka said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that her team was trying to avoid her because it's not really healthy to be around her right now. Think about that statement for a second. Really let it sink in. She's literally warning people that she's in such a toxic headspace after this loss, that her own team, the people who are literally paid to support her and help her through difficult moments, are actively trying to stay away from her because being around her current energy is psychologically draining and potentially harmful to their own mental health. That level of transparency is almost unheard of in professional tennis. Most players protect their image very carefully, offering sanitized versions of their emotions that fit neatly into the narrative of the resilient champion who always bounces back stronger. They talk about learning experiences and growth opportunities and how every setback makes them more determined. Sabalenka is out here telling the entire world that she's crying, laughing hysterically, and that she's so unbearable to be around that her own team is giving her space because they literally can't handle her current energy. This is real. This is what actually happens when you dedicate your entire life to a sport, fight your way through 2 brutal weeks of matches at a Grand Slam, and fall just short in the final. You don't just immediately flip a switch and become ready to compete again a week later. You're mentally destroyed. You're physically exhausted. You need time to process the grief, the disappointment, the what-ifs that keep replaying in your mind on an endless loop. So when you look at Sabalenka's withdrawal from Qatar through this lens, it suddenly makes perfect sense. The woman is emotionally wrecked and physically drained after Melbourne. She needs time to get her head right, to process what happened, to grieve the loss properly before she can start rebuilding and preparing for the next challenge. Playing another high-level tournament just days after experiencing that kind of emotional trauma would be professional malpractice. She'd show up unprepared, probably lose early to someone she should beat, and dig herself into an even deeper mental hole that would take weeks or months to climb out of. Taking a strategic break to recover isn't weakness. It's smart management of a long career and recognition that mental health matters just as much as physical conditioning. But here's where things get interesting, and here's where the strategic calculations start to become glaringly obvious to anyone paying attention. It's awfully convenient that Sabalenka is only pulling out of a tournament where she's not defending significant ranking points and where she hasn't performed particularly well in recent years. Her best result at the Qatar Open was winning it back in 2020, but her performances since then have been underwhelming at best. She's not losing much in the rankings by skipping this event. In fact, she might actually be protecting her ranking by resting up and coming back strong for bigger tournaments later in the season where she has more points to defend and more prize money on the line. Now, I'm not saying Sabalenka is faking her emotional exhaustion or making up her need for rest. Mental health and burnout are absolutely real issues in professional sports, and anyone who's watched her career knows she's dealt with psychological struggles on court before. The serving yips she experienced were well documented and genuinely debilitating. But it's also true that players at this level are getting increasingly strategic and calculated about which tournaments they play and which ones they skip. The WTA calendar is absolutely brutal, packed with mandatory events and premier tournaments that all demand peak performance and maximum effort. You physically cannot play everything at full intensity without breaking down either mentally or physically or both. So players have to pick and choose. They have to prioritize the events that matter most for their ranking, their prize money, their sponsorship obligations, and their legacy. Everything else becomes negotiable. The Qatar Open clearly falls into that negotiable category for a lot of players this year. When you consider the timing, coming just days after the Australian Open with basically no real recovery window, the location requiring extensive travel to the Middle East and dealing with time zone changes, and the fact that it falls right before Dubai, which is a bigger and more prestigious WTA 1000 event, it's easy to see why players are choosing to skip Doha. If you're going to show up to the Middle East swing at all, you might as well save your energy for the tournament that actually matters, the one with the bigger prize money and the more significant ranking points and the better competition. What makes this particularly painful for the Qatar Open organizers is that Sabalenka actually has history with their tournament. She made her debut in Doha in 2020 and immediately claimed the title in spectacular fashion, announcing herself as a future star of the tour and someone to watch in the years to come. That should theoretically create some loyalty or emotional connection to the event. That should make her want to come back and defend her legacy there and show appreciation for a tournament that gave her an early career boost. But apparently winning a tournament 6 years ago doesn't create enough obligation to show up when you're tired, heartbroken, and emotionally destroyed from a Grand Slam final loss. Sabalenka doesn't owe Qatar anything just because she won there once upon a time, especially when her body and mind are screaming at her to take a break and prioritize her own well-being. The tournament organizers have to be in full crisis mode right now. They built their entire marketing campaign around having the top players in women's tennis competing on their courts. They sold premium tickets to wealthy tennis fans in the region who wanted to see world-class athletes perform at the highest level. They secured lucrative sponsorship deals based on the promise of marquee matchups and compelling storylines that would generate television ratings and social media buzz. And now, week by week, day by day, they've watched their draw get absolutely decimated by withdrawals. Their top seed is now Iga Swiatek, and she only got that position because literally everyone ranked above her in the tournament seeding pulled out. Their featured matches are now between players that most casual tennis fans have never heard of and couldn't pick out of a lineup. The star power they were banking on has completely evaporated. From a fan perspective, this situation has to be incredibly frustrating and disappointing. Imagine you're a tennis enthusiast living in Qatar or the broader Middle East region. The Qatar Open is one of the few chances you get each year to see world-class women's tennis live and in person rather than watching on television or streaming. You buy tickets months in advance, planning your entire schedule around the tournament, getting excited to see Sabalenka and Pegula and Osaka and all these incredible athletes compete at the highest level right in front of you. Then one by one, they all withdraw with various reasons. Sabalenka needs rest after Melbourne. Pegula has an injury concern. Osaka is skipping the entire Middle East swing. Keys pulls out. Krejcikova can't make it. Suddenly, the tournament you paid good money to attend looks nothing like what was advertised when you bought your tickets. You're watching what feels more like a challenger event or a lower-tier tournament than a premier WTA competition featuring the best players in the world. At what point do you start demanding a refund? At what point does the tournament lose all credibility in the eyes of fans who feel like they've been bait and switched? These are legitimate questions that tournament organizers need to grapple with, because if this becomes a pattern where the Qatar Open consistently gets gutted by withdrawals year after year, eventually fans will stop buying tickets in advance. They'll wait to see who's actually going to show up before committing their money and their time. But flip the perspective to the players themselves, particularly someone in Sabalenka's position, and the calculus looks completely different. She just experienced one of the most emotionally taxing moments of her professional career. She's exhausted in every possible way, mentally, physically, emotionally. If she forces herself to play in Qatar while still processing what happened in Melbourne, while still in that toxic headspace she described where even her own team is avoiding her, she's almost certainly going to lose early anyway. She'll show up unprepared, get upset in the first or second round by someone ranked outside the top 50, lose ranking points she otherwise would have kept by not playing at all, and compound her mental struggles by adding another disappointing result to the pile weighing on her psyche. The smart play, the professional play, the move that protects her long-term career interests, is to recognize when you're not ready and take the time you actually need to get right. This isn't about being soft or lacking competitive fire. This is about being intelligent and strategic about managing a career that you hope will last another decade. You can't run yourself into the ground chasing every single tournament when your mind and body are telling you to stop. This whole situation exposes a fundamental problem with how the WTA structures its calendar and schedules its tournaments. There are simply too many mandatory and premier-level events crammed into too short a time frame. Players are expected to maintain peak performance for essentially 11 months out of the year with only a brief off-season that's barely long enough to heal from accumulated injuries, let alone take a meaningful mental break and recharge for another grueling year of constant travel and competition. The result is exactly what we're seeing in Qatar. Players are burned out, injured, and mentally exhausted. So they're forced to make strategic decisions about which tournaments actually matter and which ones they can afford to skip without significantly damaging their ranking or their earning potential. The tournaments that end up getting sacrificed are the ones with unfortunate timing, lower prize money relative to other events, or less prestige in the tennis world. Qatar checks all those boxes this year. Iga Swiatek stepping up as the new top seed in Doha is interesting from a competitive standpoint. She's the world number 2 and arguably the most dominant player on tour right now in terms of consistency and results. With Sabalenka and half the other top players out of the draw, Swiatek's path to the title just opened up dramatically. She has to be looking at this situation thinking it's a golden opportunity to collect some relatively easy ranking points and prize money against significantly diminished competition compared to what she'd normally face at a premier-level event. But even that victory would feel somewhat hollow, wouldn't it? Winning a tournament because everyone else withdrew isn't quite the same as beating them head-to-head in compelling matches and proving you're the best player in the field when everyone is at their best. Sure, You get the trophy and the points and the prize money check, but there's always going to be an asterisk in people's minds. Oh yeah, Swiatek won Qatar, but Sabalenka and Pegula and Osaka weren't even there. It's like winning a race where half the competition didn't show up to the starting line. The players who got bumped up from qualifying into the main draw should be absolutely thrilled though. Athletes like Alexandra Eala, Daria Kasatkina, Kristina Buxa, and others are getting an unexpected opportunity to compete at a level they might not have reached based purely on their own merit and current ranking. This could be a genuinely career-defining moment for some of them. A deep run in a premier event, even one that's been gutted by withdrawals, can completely change your ranking, your confidence level, and your entire trajectory as a professional tennis player. Suddenly, you're getting into bigger tournaments automatically based on your ranking instead of having to grind through qualifying. Suddenly, sponsors are interested in working with you and offering endorsement deals. Suddenly, you're a name that tennis fans around the world recognize and follow. That's the silver lining to all this chaos and disappointment. While the tournament loses its star power and prestige, it gains unpredictability and the potential for breakthrough performances. You might see some relatively unknown player go on an inspired run and become the next big story in women's tennis. That's the beauty of sports and competition. When the favorites don't show up, someone else gets their moment to shine and sees an opportunity. Sabalenka's stated plan is to rest and recover properly and then come back for the Dubai Championships. Dubai is a significantly bigger deal than Qatar in terms of prestige, prize money, and ranking points. It's a WTA 1000 event compared to Qatar's 500 level status. So strategically, it makes perfect sense to skip the smaller tournament and save your physical and mental energy for the bigger one that actually matters for your career trajectory. She's not abandoning the Middle East swing entirely. She's not hiding from competition or running away from tennis. She's just being selective and intelligent about where she invests her limited physical and mental resources at a time when she desperately needs recovery. That's professional sports in 2025. You can't do everything and be everywhere, so you prioritize what matters most and make peace with missing the rest. The Dubai tournament is going to be absolutely stacked with talent because it's one of those events where the appearance fees and prize money are substantial enough that players show up even when they're tired, even when they're dealing with minor injuries, even when they'd honestly rather be resting at home. That's the reality of professional tennis that fans don't always see or understand. Money talks. If the payout is big enough, if the appearance fee makes it worth your while financially, suddenly everyone finds the energy and motivation to compete despite their exhaustion. What this entire Qatar Open disaster really exposes is the fundamental disconnect between what fans want and expect and what players actually need to maintain long, healthy careers. Fans want to see the best players competing at every single tournament, giving maximum effort, creating amazing matches and compelling storylines that make for must-watch television. Fans want their favorite athletes to show up and perform like superheroes every single week without any signs of human limitation or vulnerability. Players, on the other hand, want to have long, healthy, financially successful careers that last well into their 30s if possible. They want to avoid injuries that could derail their prime earning years. They want to win the tournaments that actually matter for their legacy and their bank account. They want to make strategic decisions that maximize their earning potential while minimizing the physical and mental wear and tear on their bodies and minds. Those two sets of desires don't always align perfectly, and when they conflict, the players are going to choose their own well-being every single time because they're the ones who have to live with the consequences. The WTA needs to fundamentally rethink how it structures the calendar and schedules its tournaments, or situations like Qatar are going to keep happening year after year. Tournaments are going to keep getting gutted by withdrawals because players are exhausted and injured and mentally drained from an unsustainable schedule. The solution might be spreading events out more evenly throughout the year and giving players actual meaningful recovery windows between tournaments instead of cramming everything together. It might be reducing the number of mandatory events so players have more flexibility in building their schedules around their individual needs. It might be increasing prize money across the board so even the smaller tournaments become attractive enough financially that players show up regardless of how they're feeling physically or mentally. Whatever the solution is, the current system clearly isn't working for anyone involved. We're watching a premier-level tournament fall apart in real time because the players it's supposed to showcase would rather be literally anywhere else doing anything else. Until the WTA makes meaningful systemic changes to address player burnout and schedule congestion, we're going to keep seeing exactly what's happening in Qatar right now. A tournament that should be exciting and competitive and full of star power and compelling matchups turns into a shell of what it was supposed to be. Sabalenka's withdrawal is just the latest and most high-profile example, but it absolutely won't be the last time this happens. As long as the system is set up the way it currently is, with impossible expectations and inadequate rest periods and an 11-month grind that breaks down even the toughest competitors, players are going to make strategic decisions about where to compete and where to rest and recover. They're going to prioritize their health and longevity over tournament prestige and fan expectations. They're going to choose the events that matter most for their careers and skip the ones that don't move the needle. And tournaments like Qatar are going to continue paying the price for a broken system. So there you have it, folks. Aryna Sabalenka pulled out of the Qatar Open along with approximately half of the other top players in women's tennis. And now the tournament has basically become a free-for-all for whoever actually bothered to show up. This isn't just about one player making a tough personal choice. This is about a systematic failure in how professional tennis operates and schedules its events. This is about a calendar that's completely unsustainable for human beings who need rest and recovery. This is about the inevitable collision between commercial interests and athlete well-being. And based on everything we're seeing right now, the athletes are choosing themselves and their health. And honestly, after hearing Sabalenka describe how toxic her current mental state is and how even her own team is avoiding her, can you really blame her for taking the time she needs? Make sure you smash that like button if you think the WTA needs to completely restructure their calendar to prevent disasters like this. Drop a comment below telling me whether you support Sabalenka's decision to withdraw or if you think she owes it to fans to show up regardless of how she's feeling. And absolutely hit that subscribe button because tennis drama never stops, tournaments keep imploding, and we're going to be here covering every shocking development as the season unfolds. This is just the beginning.